This is the Bama Podcast with Marty Solomon. I'm his co-host, Brent Billings. Today we are joined by special guest Porshe Chiles. She holds a master's degree in higher education from the University of North Texas, and she is currently the Associate Director of Global Research at Wake Forest University. Moving from Texas to Japan to North Carolina and other places in between, Porshe has a wealth of experience in language and intercultural studies. So Porshe, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's start with just a little of your own introduction. Porshe, can you introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit of who you are and what you do?
All right, yeah. So Porshe Chiles, she, her pronouns, originally from Dallas, Texas. As Brent shared, my background is in global research, and I work at a private school, Wake Forest University in North Carolina. A good bit of my time in education has been spent on diversity, inclusion, and social justice work through both domestic and international lenses. So I teach, I train, I do research, and just spend a lot of time on those areas. I also support faith-based communities in my local community through a program called Can We Talk, where I've been working with them for about 3 years and getting church folks engaged in the conversation around race, and our belief system, our faith. I lived abroad, and that definitely impacted my life. Lived in Japan for a year and taught English, and those things definitely shaped my understanding of ethnic identity and who I am, and gave me some insight into just God's amazing design for human beings. My master's is in education, and I love learning. I'm getting a second master's degree right now in global affairs from Wake Forest University. And today's my birthday, actually. So I am now in my late 30s, which is a hard thing for me to come to grips with, but excited about that.
And you agreed to talk to us on your birthday?
It's a gift. I think it's a gift to myself. There you go.
That is good. Well, it is a gift to us. So I appreciate that. So now you've told us about who you are and what you do. Tell us a little bit about your story and just personally where you've come from and what your experience just has been being you.
Yeah. So raised in Dallas, parents that were believers, grew up in Baptist environments. And so reading the Bible was always a part of my life, going to church, went to non-denominational churches, majority white churches most of my life. But about third grade, my parents decided to go to school for their degrees. And so we packed up and moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where they attended Oral Roberts University, a private Christian university there. My dad took Hebrew, and so it was amazing and great hearing different languages spoken and practiced in my house. He also took Russian. We were really encouraged as kids. I'm one of 3 kids, and so we were really encouraged to challenge and analyze things. And so if we had questions for our parents, we could always ask them that. We were engaged to kind of challenge or push back a little bit. So that really gave me confidence in doing and kind of living a life like that, which is great for home, not so great in educational settings all the time. And so from about 3rd to 8th grade, my parents decided to homeschool us. And so we used a Christian curriculum, and a lot of that was just, again, reinforced who God was, who he called us to be, how he wanted to, as you all say, partner with us in doing some great work. And so that was just kind of really instilled in me. Everything from going to Awana, not sure if you're familiar with that, but it is an organization that focuses on equipping local churches and small groups to disciple children to teenage years. And so spent just a good bit of time in the church. I went to a large high school after my parents got divorced. I moved back to Dallas with my mom, and we went to a large school and joined a large, predominantly Black church. Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship. Tony Evans is the pastor there and was senior pastor when we were there. And so being in that space was an additional benefit for me because it allowed me to experience just church life, church community around folks that share the same ethnic identity as myself. And that supported me a great deal and for me trying to shape my faith. And so that was really helpful for my upbringing in that way. Moved around, left to go to Japan after a few years, and again, being challenged, being the only believer that I knew in that space, and was really just affirmed. And God really just blessed me and was gracious to me in that, even in a space where I was the only believer, somehow people noticed or took note of that. One specific example for me is I was working with a teacher, and she randomly asked me, a Japanese teacher, and she asked, "Are you a Christian?" And I said yes. She said, "I can always tell who the Christians are because something about them is just different." And so just all the things that I read in the Bible about, how they'll know you, how they'll know me by, how you love other people. And so that really just stuck with me and stayed with me. So now I'm at Wake Forest and working with InterVarsity there. I've been serving with that community for about 3 years and have done other small group discipleship groups at other schools at University of North Texas with the Village Church Denton campus. And so really excited to continue this journey for me in understanding who God is.
Yeah, absolutely. A fellow person has a heart for campus ministry. I love that. So that's awesome. I love all the InterVarsity connections I have. Just so many great organizations out there, and that's fantastic. So I wanted to just make we've had a chance, Porsche, to actually talk quite a bit back and forth via email, and then a conversation to prep for this. We've had some conversation outside of this where we've just been able to make some good notes. And one of the things that you brought up that I thought was really important, I want to make sure we mentioned it here, was that we're going to have a conversation today, and we want to recognize that you and I are not the only experiences out there, and your experience as a Black woman and my experience as a white male, and we love to put things on these binary, and the human experience is just so complex, and there's so many different experiences out there within our own sub communities. Within there's so many other things to be considered. Humanity is a complex journey and interaction and relationship with each other. And so we wanted to recognize that and not give the impression that the conversation we're going to have is comprehensive and represents the whole. So we thought that was important to mention that. And I want to mention out loud so that everybody can hear it, so that you can feel comfortable doing this. If I say something today, I want you to have full permission today on this podcast to hit the brakes, to talk to me about the language that I use. I have become so aware of so many things that I'm ignorant of and things that I want to be better with. And so I want to invite people as much as I can and I invite you to do that today. So you have full permission, Porsche, to do that and to call me out on anything that I may say intentionally, unintentionally, in ignorance or, whatever. So just feel free to do that. And then the last thing I'll just say about this is I know I want this conversation today. My heart is this is an exercise in listening and empathy. We worked really hard to try to create within the BEMA space, within the podcast space, lots of wiggle room, lots of generous, giving people lots of space to maintain their own convictions and maintain their dignity. And we've tried to not be heavy-handed or accusatory or we've tried to be just super generous with that. And yet we've already said things that I know I'll get emails about. I know I've gotten the email about social justice and how it's not biblical justice. Please save me that email. I get to have those conversations all the time. That's not what we're doing here today. What we're doing here today, what I have experienced, what matters to me, this is Marty speaking here. I have had the opportunity to listen to people's stories, and it's changed me. This is not about news feeds and media outlets. This is not about a political agenda. And that's the last thing that compels me. That does not change my heart. But hearing people's stories has changed my heart. It has changed my convictions. I understand the situations are complex, but I want to encourage a portion of our listeners that are going to be challenged to let that be okay. We're not going to hold this in a heavy-handed way. I want to invite you to join me in a journey that I've been trying to be on, just me personally, because I have found that I need it. I need this journey. So, did I say that okay, Porsche? What do you think about that?
Sounds great.
Good. So you, Porsche, you wrote me and shared. I loved the email you wrote. It was generous. It was compassionate. It was considerate. It was also straightforward. And it was just everything it ought to have been. And And you mentioned how you were drawn to our podcast and the Eastern perspective. You were drawn to the deconstructive theology that we had. We're kind of walking through in different ways, but yet throughout that experience, as you got through that experience, as you brought it all together, you also shared that you didn't feel seen. I love that phrase. You didn't feel seen as a Black woman. And you weren't finding that space within our podcast conversation. And so, first of all, I want to ask if you can share, let's go to that first part of that. Can you speak to some of the things that you really enjoyed about the podcast, the content, the things that you celebrated as you listened to what we were doing with Bema?
Yeah. So I've been listening for about 2 years, and really I was recommended the podcast from a fellow believer and just started listening, and it was transformational for me because it was one of the first times I had heard the gospel not centered in a U.S. lens. And that has been increasingly important for me. I shared that my work is around identity development and wanting to understand the world as it pertains to unique perspectives. And so it was helpful for me to hear stories that I'd heard from as a child and hear those things shared in deeper ways, in more meaningful ways. And so being able to kind of use my imagination and hear, as in the beginning podcast, as you are describing what the covenant would have looked like and what that relationship would have looked like and how it would have been performed. And so not having those details, if you are, if you're not in a space that's taught to you continuously and you commit it to memory, it is, and like it's pulling scales off eyes for me because, it centers another voice. It forces me to understand the Bible in enlightened geographical ways and enlightened cultural ways. And that in and of itself has been a really big blessing because when I go back and I read and I'm looking at other examples or, other texts or different, versions of the Bible, not versions, but, like ESV or NIV or whatever, I'm kind of comparing what was taught in church for me for so many years. I can go back and say, oh no, so this is how this connects to the New Testament. Okay, so this was taken out of context when it was taught to me. This helps me frame my understanding of God's people better. This helps me frame the better understanding of what they mean when this is being said. Oh, this is something that would have been understood by, the Jewish people, by Israelites. And me being an outsider would not have picked up on that had I not had you all share that more thoroughly. And so that's been like I said, it's been a gift. And I encourage my students to listen to the podcast. All my friends, they know I'm going to bring it up for them, but it's also allowed me to have a deeper understanding of who God is and the text. Right. And so when I hear you all say things like, God wants to partner with people, it gives me a clearer understanding of what partnership could look like or what he may want a partnership to look like, and allows me to put myself hopefully humble myself better to seek out to understand that.
So, Porsche, that kind of makes me wonder. So, knowing you lived in Japan for a year and that a lot of your work involves international students from, I assume, a pretty wide variety of cultures, I would think that you have a lot more exposure to Eastern culture than most Americans, most Western people. And so I'm wondering, how did that experience help you understand the Bema material, or maybe the other way around, even where you had some experiences that you didn't understand or didn't see in a particular light, but then once you had context from Bema on that Eastern perspective, helped you see some of those experiences. So I don't know if you have some examples of things or anything you want to share about your interaction with Eastern culture and how that relates to Bema.
Yeah. So for all the things that the West has to offer, I think one thing that has been really challenging for me personally has been the individualism, how we operate. And I won't mention any brands, but there's a lot of eyes involved in a lot of things, right? And so it's a lot of, for me, navel gazing is the word I'll use. And so this eye-centered community or ideology really, in my opinion, kind of is in opposition in some ways of the communal way in which I was able to experience Japan and the other just places that I've been able to visit. And so, and also I'll say this, as a Black American, there are some deeply communal things that resonated with me in listening to you all share about Hebrew people, the people of God's people, right? God's chosen, selected people. And it never, although I understood it being a Black person and seeing it lived out while living in Japan and other places, again, this sharing of space, this deep tradition, this desire to keep tradition, and not because you're looking to keep everyone else out, but understanding that there is value in holding tightly to these cultural and ethnic identities. And that has just been amplified for me. And so there's some things, communal practices, the communal reading of a text. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Black church, but in a lot of traditional Black churches, there's this call and response. And so hearing you all speak to that as some things that would have happened in synagogue places, and knowing that, oh, there is a connection for me, a deeper cultural connection. Again, seeing it lived out in Japan was amazing, seeing these intergenerational families and really understanding, when in the New Testament, it talks about, older generation teaching the younger, seeing that live because you are living with the people and you're seeing and you're experiencing firsthand, right, how they live, and in some ways having a better understanding of why they do the things they do. And so those experiences have stayed with me. And again, I see it just in so many other parts of the world. And I wish we would adopt that viewpoint or that ideology a bit more instead of at least for me, I'll say, growing up and, going to college and getting out of the house. My mother and I often talk about what would it have looked like if we stayed to build and grow. And so those are some things that I wish I would have heard about in the church context. But I recognize that maybe a bit more of the Western ideology coming into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's on some level, similar things that you experience, some of those things that were missing, some of those things that were lacking as you even went through the podcast and had that experience. So I'd love to hear more and listen some more. If you could talk to us about just the experience you had of not feeling seen, like not finding that your unique experience was necessarily found a home in the larger conversation that we were having. Can you give some words to that?
Yeah. As a layperson and someone who is just trying to build faith in community, I remember being a kid and hearing, I don't know if you've heard the song, Jesus loves the little children of the world, red, yellow, black, white, they're precious in his sight. And I am not saying that is like biblically sound by any stretch of the imagination, but I heard that my entire life. And then in hearing, you all share about this deeply communal people, this God chosen people, and me trying to see, well, Jesus, I believe you love me. God, I believe you love me. Where am I in the text? It seems as if I'm left out, and I don't want to misinterpret or misunderstand what's being placed there. Again, I recognize that geographically, the Bible is around the MENA region, right? Middle East, North Africa. And there are examples that in the Bible where there's engagement with people of African descent. But in listening to you, I kept wondering, like, okay, I see a connection for me personally. And I see some overlaps in the way I've understood the gospel, but I don't see myself represented. And then at the same time, trying to remind myself, Porsche, it's not about you, but God does see you, and God does, hear you. And so trying to, as an educator, I often push my students to think critically. And so I've been trying to use critical analysis for a few things. I mentioned earlier geography. And so recognizing that Egypt is in the continent of Africa. But for some reason, in this Western space I've been taught, I don't know if they move it, or I don't know, what happens to that country being a part of that continent, but it's just not taught outwardly or expressed outwardly. And so in hearing you all talk about the Exodus, I kept wondering, what happened to those Egyptian people? How were they a part of this larger narrative? I know the scripture says that some Egyptians went with, God's chosen people as they exodus out of Egypt. What are their stories? Were they kind of enveloped into the larger narrative? In my life, I'd heard rumors about Moses' wife, Porshe, I believe is what I've heard you call Moses. Well, my understanding of Moses' name. it'd been rumored for me in my childhood that he married a woman of African descent. Like, is that true? I don't want to hang my hat on something that's not being true. And then fast forwarding to thinking about Mary and Joseph and Jesus's birth, how they had to flee, to Egypt for as for the persecution of Romans. And so, what did that experience look like for them? Right? You don't. I have a saying that you don't run and hide out to where you stand out. So, what again is this connection to the continent of Africa? Where do I? Although I keep hearing and seeing in Scripture, what is the connection? Where do I fit in? And I love to talk about the Ethiopian eunuch, because in my head, Ethiopia is in kind of the Midwestern part of the continent of Africa. And so I have wrestled with this eunuch, number one, reading the scriptures. You all shared about, how would he have had this text of Isaiah? And so I'm thinking, okay, well, if it wasn't translated for him, how did he come into the knowledge of Yahweh? How did he understand? How did he know who God was? Why was he traveling to Jerusalem? Did he speak the language? Because it doesn't say there was a conversation where he and Philip needed a translator. Like, all these questions continue to swirl around me as I'm thinking through the text, as I'm hearing you all work your way through the text, and it's there. And so I believe God intentionally created me in the skin and ethnic identity of which he did. And I've wrestled with saying, like you said, Marty, not feeling seen in that. I believe that God loves me. I believe that I recognize that I am not of the originally chosen people, but I want to partner with God. And so how do I partner with a God of the universe if I don't fully see how he sees me in the way that he loves me, and how my narrative or people that share the same ethnic identity as myself is an important part of the text as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And since we've even had a chance to have our conversations, I've just thought of so many places over these years-long journey that we've been recording, missed opportunities. I have not been trained to see those opportunities, and I don't have to. Like, I get to lean into my very confined experience when I go to the text, when I hear it. I get to hear it through my... I don't know if I'm shocked. I'm not shocked. I guess I missed opportunities on the podcast. I think we as a church that I was raised in missed opportunities to teach us how to think more that way, to see those opportunities. We just missed them, and because they are there. You're absolutely right about some of these examples. About the characters from Egypt. I love the Zipporah. Absolutely. The Midrash has Jethro. Like, a lot of people are going to be like, well, they're Midianites and that's going to be more Arabian. No, well, Jethro, according to the Midrash, comes out of Egypt, like deep Egypt. And that's why he's in Midian. So absolutely, Zipporah would have had a much more African descent. And yeah, the Ethiopian eunuch, 110%. And I even see that in my mind now. Like, when I see the story, I've gotten to a place where I see this deeply African, deeply dark-skinned individual in a chariot, but I don't. It still doesn't come out of my mouth. It's still a missed opportunity to reflect on the relevance and the significance of that aspect of the story that would bridge the gap. And see, this is what I mean when I tell our listeners, this is not about me digging in my heels or taking a stance. It's about me listening, because when I hear your story, I don't have to feel attacked. I just get to go, oh goodness, yes, what an opportunity to bring somebody in. That's what the whole story of the Ethiopian eunuch was about. Goodness, he's getting the opportunity. He wants to know, is this story for me, or is it just for everybody else? Is this story for me, or is it just for Jews? That's what he wants to know. And we always make it about Jesus, and again, turn it into a bunch of theological statements. What he wants to know, as we taught in our lesson, is this for me? I'm an outsider. I feel like an outsider. And Philip says, absolutely, this is for you. And there's this, we alluded to Isaiah 58, there's a place for you. There's a place for you in God's house. God says he writes your name on the walls of the temple, Isaiah 58. Oh, what a missed opportunity now that I hear your story. And I don't think I'll ever teach that the same. What about Hagar, this Egyptian maidservant brought out from Egypt? And then in so many ways, when you read the story, you're like, is she discarded? Is she, and yet what does she say? The God who sees me. Like, the God who sees me. Like, what a missed opportunity to talk about some of these things. And I just really appreciate you sharing that. But what are the things, if you were to think about that and reflect on that, Porsche, what are some like just big ideas, things that we could have done, things that we can do moving forward in this space to where that wouldn't have been so much the experience? What are things in an alternate universe we could have done to make that, to round that out more?
Yeah. A few things that come to mind immediately is I love that you all share resources, and I'm always wondering, are there other scholars that could be drawn on from that offer unique experiences and perspectives that are, of course, in line. I'm not pulling anything outside of that, but what other scholars are out there that are having similar conversations, and how do you all pull those folks in? If it's reading, if it's books, can we amplify some of those voices that may not have the same platform or access? That's one way for me. And in my experience God's been super gracious for me in that, alongside your podcast, there are a few others that I listen to, and they're just Black people, wanting to understand the Bible, helping me to understand why I believe what I believe. Jude 3 podcast has been an amazing gift to me in walking me through the Bible and walking other believers that identify as Black, or anyone else for that matter, who feels like an outsider, right? And who feels othered and wants to be a part of the conversation. A few other names that I will drop that have been a blessing to me are Isa McCauley and Pastor Eric Mason. Those folks for me have helped me remove a Western lens, right, or challenge the Western ideology that I've just kind of was grown into and thrust upon the water that I swam in for so long. And so those are a couple of examples. Additionally, as we're sharing, as I am understanding more about the God of the Israelites, can we give specific examples of folks that would have been identified as maybe non-Middle Eastern or non-Greek, non-Roman? Were there other people in the early church, that were a part of this community? Again, thinking about the Ethiopian eunuch, like, how did he even know? Like, who else went? And he took that back to other people. And so, again, challenging this ideology, and this is a really more historical academic space that I know I live in, but there's this belief system that, European missionaries came and saved folks in the continent of Africa. And so, but as I'm reading in Acts, I'm like, no, I've got to challenge that, because here's this example. How would this Ethiopian eunuch known at all about the God of the Israelites? And so are there spaces or ways that we can dive deeper into those texts and name, geographically where these folks may have been located? And what they would have looked like. I know I wasn't there, and there's no way for me to go back, but I have to believe that the closer to the equator one is, the darker one becomes, just by nature of the sun. And so, can we name those things openly and outright? And so, and then some of my notes, I thought about season 5, episode 192, the intentional relationships with people in the story. What were those other intentional relationships that were there as the disciples are, as followers of the way, are being asked to build community? What were those intercultural relationships, those cross-cultural relationships? And it may not all be with folks of African descent, right? I recognize it's talked about the day of Pentecost. It was, Jewish folks from different cultural and ethnic backgrounds and languages. And so what would that have looked like? And can we highlight some of those experiences? Yeah.
Wow, that's great. And again, Porsche and I have been able to have conversations elsewhere, so this doesn't need to be done like in front of anybody else. We've been able to have our conversations, and I've hopefully been able to apologize to Porsche for her experience in ways that she can hear. But I want to take the opportunity to do the same thing for like other listeners and people that could have had similar experiences to you because of opportunities I didn't take, because of the trivial, lackadaisical way I approach things like patriarchy or these same ethnic topics, and missed opportunities to, like, when I haven't been strong enough in drawing lines and connecting dots between, empire and what it looks like and how it's led to, in spite of the ways that people have heard my passion for the alien, the orphan, the widow, for the mumser, at times I have simply been complicit in the same kind of systems or language, or that only made the problems worse. And what that did was it made other people feel like they were on the outside of the gospel, like they were on the outside of the story. The exact opposite thing of what God keeps trying to draw us and invite us into. And so for anybody that may be like Porsche and her experience, I just want to say I apologize for the ways I've contributed to that. I've been on a long journey, and I am only getting started over the last few years, especially in my life. And I just know that I've contributed at times to the problem. And I know that has consequences, like that has hurt people. It's made people feel excluded, and it's made people feel unseen in the face of a story and a God who just so badly wants to make sure that people realize they are seen by him, and we're supposed to be that priesthood that propels that story forward. So, I know I've participated in that at times because of unintentionally, and at times because I just haven't done the work that I needed to do. B, I know that that's impacted folks and been hurtful. And then C, I want to get better at some of these things. And so having these conversations changes stuff for me. I appreciate Porsche being able to reach out and tell me these things. I remember even before, I think it was a couple weeks before you even emailed me, Porsche, I was looking at my guest list for all the speakers we had, all the guest interviews we wanted to do for session 6. And they were, I think I had 43 names on a notebook. They were all 43 of them were white. 42 of them were men. And I just had to pull the plug on that plan and say, I have to get better at, like you said, elevating some of these other voices, sharing a platform, widening my own just circle of folks that I'm connected with and that I get to know. And so there are lots of things that need to be done, and we want to be a part of doing that. So definitely want to just put that statement out there and commit to doing better with that.
And let me just call out Porsche's chutzpah in contacting us. Like so I'm looking at this Acts 8 passage and just like mulling over it, and they've the Ethiopian eunuch and Philip have been talking for some time. They're mulling over the text. They're wrestling together, which is amazing. And then it says, as they traveled along the road, they came to some water. And the eunuch said, look, here is water. What can stand in the way of my being baptized? Or what can stand in the way of my being a part of this community? And Porsche just has that, like, hey, I see this narrative of God. What is going to stand in the way of my calling out Marty and Brent and saying, how can I, like, what's going to stand in the way of me being part of this narrative?
And it was done so well. Like, I have gotten such angry emails. I will get emails about this episode. And Porsche, your email was just done with all kinds, like exactly what Brent said. Chutzpah, straightforward, boldness, but such generous, open-handed, compassionate. It was not attacking. It didn't act like I was an idiot. It was just honest, and it was so good. And I will field probably who knows how many emails that will not be compassionate, and they will be very arrogantly postured and tell me all the things that I need to know because apparently I'm an idiot. And I just appreciate, Porsche, how you did it. It was just so well done. So thank you for being willing to do that. It's going to make us better, and I'm thankful for that personally. So thank you. Let me ask you. You put a note on here late in our discussion. We have some notes in front of us here, and you added a note towards the bottom here. Something about how you've recognized that oftentimes, I think this fits off of what we just actually mentioned here just a moment ago, we like to take the Bible and put it in an abstract place where, like it's not about, like it's in this weird abstract vacuum where it's not about politics, it's not about race, it's not about any of those like controversial issues. It's just about like some abstract theological ideas. And you have some comments on what your experience has been with that. Could you speak to that, Porsche?
Yeah, sure. I'm thankful to the Holy Spirit in that when I read the text, it's real to me, right? Like these are real people who live real lives. It wasn't some movie fairy tale that everyone lived perfectly. We see amazing examples of that being the opposite, right? David was a man after God's own heart, and he was a hot mess sometimes. That's helped me because what I recognize is it isn't just abstract. And so I identify as a Black American woman, and I cannot separate biblical text from my current events, past events, social issues of today and yesterday. My lived experiences have not allowed me to live in a way that I live as if I don't believe the text, right? I am really into ancestry. It's in February, so Black History Month is it's always on my mind, but definitely during the month of February. And recently, my mother found a copy of the Slave Manifest of my ancestors from New Orleans down to South Carolina. The plantation that my grandfather's family would have come from, it still stands. That family still lives there. And I am related to those folks. And so for me, the Bible being good news, I have to think about my ancestry. I have to think about what good news did they receive, because whatever it was, they believed it. They lived as if they believed it. They lived with the hope that even though they couldn't see it, that they couldn't feel it, they didn't know what it felt like, they couldn't experience it, they didn't know folks that experienced it, they believed that there was freedom on the other end of something. And so with that in my heart and in my head, I believe that those people who were kidnapped and abused and raped physically and psychologically abused, and some of them believed in the text. They believed in when they read or when it was read to them about the children of Israel having an exodus outside of Egypt. They believed that the God of the Israelites, the God of his chosen children, could and would do the same thing for them. They clung to that with desperation. They believed that the God of the gospel brought and brings salvation and freedom. And that's what they clung to. And that is what I cling to currently, is that I don't separate that. I live it because I believe it. And that, again, it's February. I've been doing a lot more research, but those are the things that have stayed with me, and why wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to know that the God of the universe sees me and is intentional and wants to partner with people that look like me in his bigger narrative, right? My whole life, when it came to anything about diversity and inclusion in the church, or just about culture in the church, Revelation 7 and 9 is always mentioned, and what heaven will look like or be like. And for me, I want to experience that. And so, if it says every nation, tribe, and tongue, that means every nation, tribe, and tongue will be represented there. And so, again, it just reaffirms that God is intentional, and he wants to partner with these folks of different languages, of different ethnic identities, of different hues. And that's good to him, right? I was made in the same imago Dei as anyone else is, and that's good to him. And that, again, just gives me a hope to cling to when things are not going amazingly well here in the country in which I live, or in the world, generally speaking. I cling to that truth.
That is well said. That's good. Well, we got just a little time here to field, like, what's one thing, Porsche, of the 1,000 things we could talk about, pick some item, some topic that might be related to this conversation. I would imagine that we could pull apart here before we work towards a closing. You got anything that really sticks out to you as far as like this is the thing that needed, maybe not the thing, but one of the things that could have been dealt with. Let's talk about something here.
Sure. I'm gonna go with geography. Honestly, I think time and time again I've read, where these stories are happening. But if we could be specific in who was in those places, who lived in those places, what would they, how would they would engage with other people? Because I want to be clear, I identify as Black, but I don't want a binary to be created on this side either, right? I believe, again, the God of the universe wants to partner with other people. When I hear about, disciples going to Asia, like, what is it like for those folks? So I think geography, being clear on what the folks in those spaces may have looked like or could have looked like, or, what groups, ethnic, cultural groups were there, because we do it for the Greeks and the Romans. So why not do it for folks that would have lived in Asia or in other parts of the world as the Bible, as we see it on the text being coming out, being lived out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. I mean, we talk about this whole story happening at the crossroads of the earth, in the center of all these civilizations, and yeah, I think especially when you're raised in an experience like I was raised with, you just build everything on all these assumptions and you never consider some of the things that you're just bringing to the table, which is the geography, the physical appearance, where these people came from. It was unbelievably diverse, because you're absolutely right. And when you read the opening chapters of the book of Genesis, and it's talking about the table of nations, and it's talking about all these different people groups, it represents like right there at the crossroads of the earth, the centerpiece of that ancient human civilization. There's all these people groups that are very much, that land is unbelievably accessible. And so you would have seen a great amount of diversity, like physically in their world. And they didn't look like a bunch of Greco-Roman folks. The Greeks come in quite a bit later in the story from the West. We have a very ancient Near East, and then from Babylonian and Chaldean, and then all these African, even if it's North Africa, you have all these African people groups that are absolutely connected to the story. I actually got an email in my inbox today about the whole of Curse of Ham thing, because there's this huge thing about the curse of Ham, and was Ham's curse that he was black, and then like people will quote like this, like there's a couple Jewish references that people then take and pull way out of context of what's being done and build this whole, like, I can still remember, Brent was around for this. We were doing a discussion group at the very beginning of the podcast, and we had a listener that was there in discussion, a very large group of people, a lot of them college students, and this person was talking about how one of the things that Genesis is trying to teach us is about racial purity, and the curse of Ham being, and I lost a lot of college students that day for good reason. They like just trying to figure out how to navigate that conversation, because there is this, and one of the things that the Jewish conversation is doing when it does connect, like, the descendants of Ham include Mitzrayim, include Cush, and one of the things the Bible does do is it, as far as we understand the translation, it does call out the pigment of their skin. It does call out who they are and the fact that they look different and they are different. And yet the Jewish conversation is that because of that, they're mistreated. Like, that's the assumption. Like, somehow some folks out there turned it into like the curse, when in fact what the Bible is doing is going, because they don't look like the majority, even in that Middle Eastern context, because they still look so different, they have been mistreated, they are looked at differently, and that's part of what the Jewish conversation is trying to bring up. In fact, it even connects like God's people to, I loved you because you know what it's like to be mistreated. And some of the prophetic utterances are just like the people of Cush. And so, yeah, again, just missed opportunities of not being able to pull those things out and talk about those things, because you're absolutely right. This is a crossroads of the earth, not just in physical geography of like practical highways, but the people on those highways would have looked very diverse. And why is it that whenever anybody in the scriptures, from Old to New Testament, from Revelation back through Isaiah, when anybody gets a glimpse of heaven, like the first thing they have to tell you, the first thing that everybody tells you is, I got a glimpse of heaven. And before I even tell you what I saw, I got to tell you, everybody was there. Every tribe, every people, every nation. Well, how did they know that? They knew that because they looked around the room and they went, look at the kaleidoscope of people and humanity. It's just, it's a glorious picture that my life so rarely parallels. And so it's just a wonderful topic to bring up. I'm going to be, because of our interactions in this conversation, I'm going to be so much more aware of and apt to point out where that shows up, because the geography is so much more than we talked about. And that's a wonderful, wonderful point.
And I think even like looking at the Tower of Babel story, there's like a very clear moment where we see everyone is speaking a single language. Everyone is together. Everyone is doing the same thing. And God said, this is not how things should be. The world is a better place if there are multiple languages, if there are multiple people, if there are multiple identities, multiple cultures. And so, yeah, just one more missed opportunity that we didn't bring up when we were talking about the Tower of Babel, you know.
And you're so right, Brent, because Foreman does a great job, you know, the guy who we based a lot of our Genesis teaching off of pointing out how the scattering of the Babel story is, again, not a curse. It's God saying, right now, if humanity accomplishes whatever they want to do, it's going to be unbelievably destructive. But if I can force them to have to learn empathy, again, like those two words are just ruling the day for me the last few months, curiosity and empathy. Like, if you're ever going to work together again, if you're ever going to be a humanity that can join in on a project together again, you're going to have to literally learn how to speak other languages. You're going to have to literally learn how to listen and learn from somebody else, how to see somebody else, how to honor and respect somebody who is other than you. And it's a wonderful story you bring up, because that's exactly what we'd want to model in our conversation today. If we're ever going to get back to a place where we're putting the world back together, it's because God said, well, when you finally learn to listen, if you finally learn to get over yourself and to quit just trying to preserve your own identity and your own success and your own comfort and your own experience, and you learn how to truly listen, well, then there might be hope for this world. Then we might see something new happen. And so, great story, Brent Billings. Love bringing that up. Porsche, is there anything, as we kind of start to head out of here, is there anything about your work that you would love people to know about? Anything that we can let you promote, or we can promote for you here right now?
Sure. I shared I work in academia, but I started a company to begin having these conversations further. And so a lot of it happens in an academic setting, but also I partner with local faith-based groups to facilitate and do trainings on topics of diversity, inclusion, international education, and culture. And justice, right? And I know there are a lot of issues around that in academia, but how do we approach that work? I have been super blessed to work alongside some amazing folks that are believers, and we share this idea that, you know, people are created in the Imago Dei. And I know you all talk about, you know, peace and shalom, and we want to be a part of what that looks like here. And so one way I do that is through an organization called Can We Talk? And we put on every spring semester. I live in semesters, forgive me. We put on a group of talks that we ask lay people, both of the faith and not of the faith, to come in and let's have a conversation around issues around justice and prison systems, or faith in the church, and what does that look like cross-culturally. And so that's one organization that it's really near and dear to my heart. My own company is called Endurance Consulting. And just this idea that while I'm here on earth, it's not always easy, right? But I'm called to endure and keep pushing on. And so Endurance Consulting LLC is the name of my company. Those are two ways that folks can get in contact with me, or, you know, I'm hopefully doing the work and being obedient in what that looks like.
So we have, I'll put those in the show notes, Endurance Consulting, your website. And is there anything else, any other ways that people can find you, see what you're doing, be a part of the work that you're doing? etc.?
On the Instagram, as my mother calls it the Instagram. No, I'm on Instagram. There's some generational things there. But no, on Instagram, at Endurance Consulting is where I'm at there.
And then I believe you also have a Facebook group.
That's Can We Talk? My apologies. So Can We Talk has a Facebook group. It's facebook.com/GSO Can We Talk.
Okay. And of course, that'll be in the show notes as well. And also those podcasts and speakers that you mentioned earlier on, I've got those in the notes as well. So plenty of ways to find some resources out of today's episode.
Porsche, can I just say thank you one more time? I just appreciate you being willing to be with us today, the way that you have just entered the conversation and helped us. And I just appreciate who you are and how we've gotten to know you. So thank you.
Thank you both.
Yeah, it's been great. If anyone wants to get a hold of Marty, you can find him on Twitter at Marty Solomon. I'm at EIBCB. And of course, BaymontDiscipleship.com. We've got the notes for this episode. And, definitely check out what Porsche's doing. And we're very excited to have her perspective on the show. So thanks for joining us on the Bama podcast. We'll talk to you again soon.